Today we're talking about a satanic Hammer Dracula movie that is shockingly much more boring than you would ever imagine. Today I'm continuing my review series on the Hammer Dracula films with the Satanic Rites of Dracula from 1973, or known by its original title, Dracula is Dead and Well and Living in London. This confusingly comedic title is a random nod to the musical Jacques Brel is Alive and Well and Living in Paris. Christopher Lee was very upset about this title. He's right, it didn't fit the vibe at all, so they switched to the Satanic Rites of Dracula. That's much better. And this is also a rare Hammer film that fell into the public domain, which means I could play the entire movie for you right now, and YouTube's copyright laws couldn't say a thing about it. Okay, I'm not gonna do that. It was directed by Alan Gibson and stars Peter Cushing, Michael Coles, Freddie Jones, Joanna Lumley, and of course, Christopher Lee.
Is that what you want, Count Dracula? A last blaze of utter horror and violence, ghastly annihilation of an entire planet.
So the film kicks off with a James Bond theme? Seriously, what is going on with this music? It's such a weird vibe for a Dracula film, but actually kind of an appropriate vibe for the movie that we're going to get, a James Bond influenced gothic horror movie. Actually, this also kind of sounds like some Super Smash Bros. Music. I'm actually not a gamer at all, but I hung out with friends in my 20s. We played Smash Bros. We were very popular with girls. Oh look, it's a Hitchcock movie too. Now we know we're in good hands. Yeah, it's directed by Alan Gibson, the same director as Dracula AD 1973. I think he's probably the weakest director to ever make a Hammer film. Bold statement, but with the 1-2 punch of these two films, let's just get into it. Whoa, okay, maybe I spoke too fast because we're already kicking off with a satanic cult meeting. I actually thought the title of this might be just something exploitative to get butts in the seats, but no, it's Satanic Rites. The title is true.
Hear ye, great demons of hell.
They're praying to demons of hell. There's a completely nude girl laying on the slab for human sacrifice, which I can't show you, of course. I guess I can't show this movie in entirety, even though it's in the public domain. But what I'm getting at is this movie is surprisingly more hardcore than Dracula AD 1972. In my last review where I talked about that film, I noted that it was shockingly super clean. Like, you bring Dracula to the 1970s and there's barely any violence, there's like no sexuality, it's just a really squeaky clean movie. Satanic Rites is definitely not. We're going to R-rated territory now. But it's not enough to keep this guy awake. You know, with Alan Gibson in the directing chair, I kind of understand. Whoa, okay, now we've got murder and no vampirism involved here, so I'm not really sure what's going on. Now this guy takes an eternity to get out of this house. I mean, I know we kicked off the movie with some James Bond music, a satanic ritual, that's cool, but now we're just watching this guy slowly walk around. It's not holding my interest. Let's pump this up. Honestly, I'm begging for some exposition. Who is this guy? Why do I care about him getting out of this house? Okay, a car picks him up, that's cool. Now he's on a slab and he dies. And we've got a bunch of seemingly government workers around him who are talking about how he saw John Porter there. Who is John Porter? That's the question. At this point, we go back and forth in the movie between these boring government guys where they talk about how this guy was like a Secret Service person on an undercover mission to find out if there are high-ranking members of the government involved in this satanic cult, and then scenes of the satanic cult. And this is definitely a hard turn from the vibe of Dracula AD 1972. That film was all about, oh no, fear the youth. The kids these days are getting involved in satanic rituals, full-on satanic panic, and it's just a goofy, like, kids goofing around kind of movie. But Satanic Rites is going to be about a bunch of old guys and high-ranking members of government. It's about how the older, rich, and powerful people are just as involved in the dark corners of society and the occult as the young people are. It's kind of interesting, at least it's something different. At this point, they're going through the photos that the undercover guy took of the high-ranking members of government involved in this cult. Supposedly there were supposed to be 5 of them, but there's only 4 and 1 blank picture. Is it possible that the person in that picture doesn't show up on camera? Because he's a vampire. Come on, keep up. Now we've got some kind of chase scene with people we don't really know. Honestly, the movie is kind of dull up to this point. I'm just waiting on somebody interesting to show up. Oh, look, that's Michael Coles as Inspector Murray. He's the same guy that played Inspector Murray in Dracula AD 1972. Fun fact, he is the only actor to reprise the role of the same character in the whole Hammer Dracula series other than Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. But no, he's kind of boring in this movie too. He's not really what I'm looking for. I need someone to spice this up. Here we go. Peter Cushing as Van Helsing. How these government guys are trying to figure out all this occult stuff, and they realize they need to call in an occult expert. So the cops go to our quirky amateur detective, Professor Van Helsing. It's like he's the lead of a USA Network show. He's Monk or something. Van Helsing delivers some exposition about how this is a cult that literally worships blood. That's kind of interesting. And then his granddaughter Jessica shows up, only she's recast. She was Stephanie Beacham in Dracula AD 1972, and in this one she's played by Joanna Lumley. Apparently Stephanie Beacham was unavailable, and considering all of the interesting things that this script has Jessica do, like serve tea, it's a wonder why Stephanie Beacham was unavailable. Yeah, even though Van Helsing says that she is his right hand and she sometimes knows more about this stuff than even he does, she has barely anything to do in this movie. It's kind of a shame. By the end of this scene where old guys stand around explaining things to each other, get used to that. That's going to be a running theme in this film. Van Helsing figures out that one of the guys involved is somebody that he used to know. So he goes to visit that guy, and the guy seems kind of crazy and says that he needs to complete some kind of project for somebody by the 23rd of the month. And this date is very significant for some reason. Van Helsing kind of hangs around while this guy delivers a lot of dramatic speeches about how evil rules the entire world.
Evil rules, you know. Evil and violence are the only two measures that hold any power.
Now you see that evil will always triumph, because good is dumb.
He's like your friend that's been doom scrolling too much and really needs to go touch some grass. But then he reveals that this project he's been working on is a new black plague. And that turns out to be the crux of the plot of this film, that this cult, and whoever it is that's leading this cult, I know you just can't imagine who it is literally trying to release a new, deadlier than ever black plague upon the world. So it kind of is like a Bond movie, that these guys need to band together to stop this evil group from releasing this into the world. Actually, that's literally the plot of No Time to Die, the last Bond movie. By the way, how good is that movie? I love No Time to Die. I wish we were talking about that right now. Around this point, we figure out that this Jane girl, apparently her name is Jane, we don't really get to know her at all, got kidnapped by the cult. She's being held in this really crappy room, and who comes in but Dracula? He just walks in. Okay, hang on. This is clearly a direct sequel to Dracula AD 1972. Full continuity. We got Inspector Murray back. We got Jessica back. It's a sequel. They even referenced the end of the last movie. And Dracula died and was buried at the end of the last film. And I understand he gets resurrected all the time, but they don't even attempt any kind of resurrection scene, any kind of explanation. I mean, in Scars of Dracula, they just had a bat barf on his ashes. They couldn't even do that. Dracula just walks in like it, just so nonchalant. It's really lame, honestly. He comes in to bite this girl, and whatever, I don't even care. I don't know who this girl is. This is a crappy setting for it. I mean, look at this set. It looks terrible. I'm kind of embarrassed for Christopher Lee right now. No resurrection. If there's anything that man deserves, it's a damn resurrection. Now Inspector Murray and Jessica, who are apparently working together now, I don't really understand how that happened, are going to investigate this house. And because Inspector Murray is a true gentleman, he goes to investigate the house and he sends Jessica down to the spooky crypt. But he goes in there and discovers that Chin Yang lives there, who is supposedly the leader of this cult as far as they know. And when Jessica is down in the crypt, she gets attacked by a bunch of female vampires that are chained to the walls. And honestly, unless you say that any possible scene that Peter Cushing is in is a good scene by default, and honestly there's a good argument for that, I would say this is the first good scene in this movie. We're like 43 minutes into it. Vampires attack Jessica, Dracula, and they're pretty creepy. They got big fangs coming out. They're bursting from the walls. There's weird slow motion that is an effect, a vibe that's never showed up in the series before, and I don't think works, but still, it's a vampire attack. It's cool. One of our boring government guys ends up down there too and uses a pro vampire bite blocking technique. Well done, sir. And then they stake this girl with a bloody staking sequence. This is actually awesome. This is another example of why this is a much less tame film than the last one. During another scene where these guys stand around explaining things to each other, man, this movie is super exciting. They deduce that the cult is probably led by this reclusive business tycoon named D.D. Denham.
Tycoon called Denham. D.D. Denham.
Okay, I know the first D stands for Dracula, but what does the second D stand for? Yes, in the 2 years since the end of Dracula AD 1972, they literally say it's been 2 years. Dracula has apparently established himself as a huge multi-millionaire business tycoon under the name D.D. Denham.
Master of the undead, Count Dracula.
A total recluse, which is probably some kind of nod to Howard Hughes. I would honestly rather watch the movie where Dracula is the star and it's all about his rise to power in the business world. That sounds like a better time.
You become a man of business. You will love business.
And they figure out that the 23rd of the month, remember that date was going to be significant, is a Sabbath of the Undead. And okay, I know you don't realize this because I'm kind of just giving you the highlights of this movie, but when you watch it for yourself, oh my God, this exposition scene goes on for an eternity. It is so long. This movie is just packed with these guys standing around explaining things to each other. It's endless. This movie is very exciting. That's what I'm trying to say. But the conclusion Van Helsing comes to is actually pretty cool. He deduces that Dracula is trying to unleash this extremely deadly plague, and they're really driving that home because he literally wants to end the world.
But just suppose he yearns for final peace. He'd want to bring down the whole universe with him.
He literally wants to die. He wants an end to his eternal existence, but he doesn't just want to die himself. He wants to take the entire world down with him.
The ultimate revenge.
And I think that is awesome. That's like a great idea for a Dracula plot. The plot of this movie on paper is so interesting. It has so many really good ideas. I mean, Dracula's a business tycoon is maybe not the best idea.
Business.
But this whole plague thing, it's great. The problem is almost the whole movie is taken up in a couple of office buildings where guys stand around and explain things to each other. It's very suspenseful. A perfect film. This is interesting. Here's a scene where Van Helsing makes a silver bullet. The first time in the series, it's been brought into the lore that you can kill a vampire, not just a werewolf, with a silver bullet. I don't think he ever actually uses this bullet, unless I'm forgetting something, but I don't know, he makes it. Now Inspector Murray and Jessica, who are still hanging out, are they dating or something? No, there's no actual romance to this movie, so oh well. They are being hunted by Freddie Mercury, the sniper, and Michael Coles gives one of the greatest performances ever of a man terrified.
Look, Jessica, he's only playing with us. He could pick us off at any time.
Now Van Helsing has finally decided it's time to go visit this guy, D.D. Denham.
No one sees Mr. Denham. No one at all.
Man, that's the secretary I want at work. And after Cushing feels the need to pad the runtime a little with pointless questions,
Doesn't that thing make you feel self-conscious?
he gets to go into Denham's office, and it's a mysterious, tall, dark-haired man sitting behind a desk, and he sounds like
I have been expecting you ever since Julian Keeley took his own life.
Wait, what? What is this voice? What is this accent he's doing?
There is a group of us who are determined that the decadence of the present day can and will be halted.
Okay, you know what? This doesn't work. I don't like this. I think this is Christopher Lee trying to do like a Romanian classic Dracula kind of accent, but it doesn't work at all. It's not like imposing, intimidating like his real Dracula voice is. I mean, this is not Bela Lugosi. This is not Gary Oldman. Heck, this is not Bill Skarsgård.
It is a black omen to journey in poor health.
Yeah, I don't like this voice. Oh, geez, Cushing, you're not even trying to hide what you're doing there. That was really obvious.
Soli Deo Gloria, nisi Dominus.
Foolish man, a bullet cannot harm me.
Oh, thank God his voice is back. Okay, the Dracula we know and love, he is back. Oh, yeah, that was the silver bullet, so Yeah, that really was pointless. And after a scene where Inspector Murray gets attacked by a bunch of vampires and kills them via sprinklers, this is another shower kill. We got a vampire killed by a shower in Dracula AD 1972, which I understand is because vampires can be killed by running water. That's part of the lore. It's actually how Dracula was killed in Dracula Prince of Darkness, where I talked all about that part of the mythology. But you got to admit, vampires being killed by a sprinkler system really doesn't come across well on film. Now Dracula's got Jessica on the human sacrifice slab, but he kept her clothes on, unlike the other girl. Well done, Dracula. You know, he's not so bad after all. He's not such a bad guy. And there's this really cool moment where he lights up the candles magically. I honestly, I would have loved to have seen more just weird magical stuff like that from Christopher Lee's Dracula. That's the kind of thing Gary Oldman's Dracula got a lot. Now Dracula reveals his true plan, that he is going to unleash this plague onto the world using the 4 guys in the room, including Van Helsing, as his 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
I have chosen 4 messengers of death, 4 horsemen of my created apocalypse.
And I love the reaction of these dudes. They're all just like, bro, hold up. We did not sign up for this. They all think that they were just going to use that plague as bargaining in order to get what they want from world leaders. But no, Dracula wants to take down the entire world. And this actually surprises me. The tube breaks and this guy does get infected by it. And it's pretty horrifying when this guy gets it, like the visual of it, his rotting skin. You know, this movie was rough going for a while. There's just way too much exposition, people standing around. But this third act, we're getting into some good stuff here. And Van Helsing reacts to this guy the way I always do when someone is sick at work. And luckily, it seems the plague is not airborne. So as long as he avoids touching this guy, he runs out. The whole house is burning down at this point. So hopefully the plague's going to burn with it. He runs into the woods and Dracula chases him down. And this is where Dracula walks into a hawthorn tree. This is the very strange, different, some would say terrible way that Dracula gets killed in this film. It's by walking into a hawthorn bush. Now, hawthorn is said to be in Christian mythology what the crown of thorns was made of that Jesus wore when he was crucified.
Anything else?
The hawthorn tree, which provided Christ with his crown of thorns.
So there's a kind of religious significance to it, and that is why walking into this bush is enough to weaken Dracula to the point where Van Helsing can stake him. Look, I'm not saying this doesn't make sense. It's really just the same line of reasoning that holy water or crosses can weaken vampires, that the religious significance of this bush and what it was used for, you know, they're not wrong, but again, it's something that I don't think comes across very well on film, that Dracula walks into a bush and dies. Now, the visual's not too bad. You've got the thorns wrapping around his head. It kind of looks like he has a crown of thorns. It's kind of this blasphemous image of Dracula, which is kind of interesting, and at least it isn't the bush alone. So Van Helsing does stake him, and that's pretty good, and we get this full-on disintegration moment. That's pretty darn good. He looks good as he's disintegrating, and it's all the way down to his skeleton. This Dracula death is kind of a 50-50 for me, where I don't think it's a great idea, but it's good enough. It makes enough sense, and the execution is not bad, is better than I would expect. With the plague burned and Dracula decomposed, that's the end of the film, so let's rate the Satanic Rites of Dracula. Now for atmosphere, I'm gonna give this a 3 out of 10. I do think it is a step below the previous film. The atmosphere as a whole is pretty lame. Now, there's a couple of things I like. One, the satanic cults. That's not a bad setting. Not too bad. And then also the scene where Inspector Murray and Jessica are in a field. I don't know. It's just kind of a nice being out in nature in the early morning. You can hear the sound of birds. I don't know. I like to be outside in the early morning. And that is what this gives me the feeling of. So that's okay. But overall, we're mostly taking place in a couple of office buildings. Dracula's first and only biting scene in the movie is in that really crappy looking room. I mean, it just stinks. This is the worst film in the series up to this point for this category. For characters, I'm going to give this a 5. This is actually a step above the last film, really just because Dracula is better here. The rating is only for Van Helsing and Dracula. I don't care for any other characters in the movie. I think they're all really, really boring. But Christopher Lee actually has more dialogue in this one, even though he's not in much screen time, but he's a little bit more of a character than he got to be in the last film. For story, I'm going to give this another 5, and that is because I think there are a lot of really good ideas ideas here that are just not executed well. I love the plague idea, Dracula's ultimate revenge, the people investigating the satanic cult. It's all good stuff. It's just not a good script, and it's certainly not well directed at all. I mean, it really is mostly guys standing around in dingy office buildings explaining stuff. Good ideas, not well executed. And then for scares, I'm going to give this a 5, and that's for Christopher Lee. He is really good in this movie. I think the film itself is not a particularly good send-off for Christopher Lee as Dracula, because this is the last Hammer film where he's going to play the character. It's not the last Hammer Dracula film, but it is the last one with Christopher Lee. And the film isn't a good send-off, but the performance he gets to give, he gives his own good send-off, because he is really good in the movie, particularly in that third act when he finally gets stuff to do. The vampire bride attacks, the plague infection, it's pretty good. When you look at the movie as a whole, there's not a lot of good stuff, not a lot of good horror, but the stuff that's there, it's pretty good. All in all, I'm going to give this a 5 out of 10. It's a middle-of-the-road Hammer film. It's not super entertaining, but the moments that hit are pretty memorable. That's my review, but what do you think about this film? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you want to hang out with me more, I'm going to put the playlist down here of all of my Hammer Dracula reviews. I've been reviewing them all up to this point, and I've only got one more, so if you want to see that, definitely hit the like button and the subscribe button. Thank you all so much. Don't forget to enjoy yourself today, have some fun, and I'll see you next time.